This is the second studio hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borderonay. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. And today our guest is Omar Gandhi.
Omar is the founder of Omar Gandhi Architects, an architecture studio based in Halifax, Toronto, and Berlin.
Yes, and with Omar, we talk about the usual stuff on the podcast. I think this one had a different flavor to it.
Yeah.
It was. I think you'll get a very good sense of who he is, his approach to his work, and which is also his same approach to his life in a certain way, and finding joy and happiness and being in a good place, and how that impacts their thinking and what they do. And I'll leave it there. I'll leave some of the mystery for the recording. But it was thoroughly enjoyable. Check out his work. It's phenomenal, and we hope you enjoy. Sponsors. Spreadsheets can't bring your designs to life, but Programma can. Say hello to a bespoke integrated software suite built by and for experienced architecture and design professionals. Use your Pinterest image library to build collaborative mood boards, then turn them into shared online presentations with a click using Programma's pin boards. Use the Programma Web Clipper to build a centralized specification library for your studio. Share always up-to-date specifications and product schedules with clients, trades, and colleagues by generating beautiful, branded, live links, and client dashboards. Programma's clean, minimal interface allows your work to shine. Start for free and save 25% on annual plans at programma.design/secondstudio.
Architects, design leaders, founders redefining the industry. If you want to shape not only buildings but the businesses behind them, this is your moment. Future London Academy's Executive MBA takes you inside the boardrooms of Pentagram, Uber, Zaha Hadid Architects, and Google, where you will master finance, strategy, and operations from the people who already excel at them. Study alongside peers, transforming the industry worldwide, and do it all in just 9 intensive weeks over 1 year between London and California. Award-winning, transformative, crafted for design and architecture leaders with 15 plus years of experience. If you're ready to grow your impact, apply now by tapping the Future London Academy link in our show notes.
The second studio is brought to you by Chaos. They make award-winning design and visualization tools, and they're really pushing the boundaries with AI. As we all know, AI is shaking up the architecture and design world, and Chaos is taking a responsible approach. Their tools are built to help architects, designers, and visualization specialists work faster and explore more ideas without replacing creativity. Basically, Chaos wants AI to make your imagination stronger and not take over, so you get to design with more freedom, create stunning visuals, and stay in control of your work. If you want to see what that looks like, tap the Chaos link in our show notes. This is the second studio with Marina, myself, and our guest, Omar. Here we go.
I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto and, spent a lot of time playing outside with my friends. There was nothing, I would say, extraordinary about where I grew up or, my parents' house. We moved, from when I was, very small, from, small apartments to a townhouse to a fully detached home. But I think its proximity to landscape, even if that landscape was sort of artificial, those are most of my memories. I mean, I think my earliest sort of understanding was that my family was different, perhaps, than my friends' families, or even the way that we used our house with an Indian background. I remember there being a lot of people at the house at a time, and everyone would sit on the floor to eat and that sort of thing. And so, it just, at some point I realized that my home scenario or situation was a little bit different than others. So, but no, I think for me, my earliest interest in architecture came when I was accepted into a high school that was sort of in the country. So, you had to sort of drive there for about 45 minutes to get to the high school on a bus. And it went from, kind of the sort of older suburbs to the newest suburbs on the edge of development right into the country. And that's where the high school was. And it was really my first, I think, exposure with like rural landscapes. And certainly more vernacular type architecture. And that really kind of just jumped out at me as being something really kind of beautiful and authentic.
Are you would it be considered a first or second generation Canadian?
I would be first officially, but my
Right.
parents both came. My father went to the UK when he was about 10, and my mom came to Canada from India when she was like 3 or 4. So,
Oh, wow.
for the
Okay.
most part,
Yeah.
they were sort of first. But yeah, I'm officially first. Yeah.
You have the official card of first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
What was there anyone in the family or like friends, parents, and things that were designers, architects, contractors, anything like that? Or would you play with Legos? Like that's always the classic marker.
Yeah, you know what? Everybody goes on, about playing with Lego as a kid. I don't think I really did that. I was just interested in the arts. I kind of realized at
Mm.
some point early on that, maybe there was a little bit of talent there. And that was fostered by my father, who, nobody in my family was in the arts or design or anything like that. And it certainly wasn't encouraged. Uh, uh, so it was, I think my father enjoyed it when he was younger, and I think really, thought differently than maybe some of the elders in the family, and so really was sort of pushing to go down the arts and then eventually architecture road. And it's one of those weird things that I can't really explain, but usually we kind of like push back on our parents, right, when they give us advice when you're at that age.
Yeah.
So it was very weird that I was sort of like, totally into it. So, um, yeah, it kind of just went in a very linear sort of progression from that point on, from high school. Um, so yeah, that was it. It was just
What was the? Do you remember like this the distinct moment when you decided? So did you go straight from high school to college to study architecture? Is that what the path that you took?
I did, except the program that I entered into, because I was rejected at a variety of other schools that were straight architecture. The program I went to was sort of liberal arts slash, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of broad architecture. So sort of, probably a really good segue into architecture without it being too specific. And then from there went into a master's that was, specifically architecture. But um, yeah, I think I just, with each step sort of fell in love with it that much more. Um, yeah, and I think, as I was going through it, realized again that, maybe my path towards that was a little bit different than others. I mean, we didn't really travel extensively when I was young, or any of that sort of stuff. And so it was just like seeing these new things, being exposed to new ideas, and then really falling in love with it. And it was really, in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years since I've had the practice, that I've done the vast majority of my travel. So that's sort of, I was like, just seeing things now finally that I had been studying 20 years ago. So it sort of like went in a backwards way. But yeah, I mean, it
Are your
didn't take away from the excitement of it all, that's for sure.
Yeah.
are your trips mostly planned around buildings?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they're planned around buildings, but they, end up being related to work somehow. And
Mm.
whether I bring my partner or my son along on those trips. But yeah, and I'm sure that some of this might come out during this discussion, but I would say that I'm not the normal kind of architecture guy. Like I have friends and colleagues that are, definitely infinitely more interested and obsessed than I am, where I would say that, I stumble upon those things when I travel, but it's more the food and landscapes and, cafes and just walking that I love when
Mm.
I travel. Yeah, I would say I'm not the archetypal architecture nerd, that's for sure.
Not an architectural historian.
No, yeah, it's like I'm
Yeah.
a big fan. I love it, but yeah, I'm just not obsessed. I actually like a lot of other things, maybe a little bit more.
Do you think that has an impact on your work or allows you to be looser when you're approaching the work? I'm trying to think about how that would impact your approach, let's say.
Yeah, and it's maybe something I think about as well. Yeah, I think feeling less constrained, less like I need to fit into some sort of community, maybe. Feeling like I'm approaching architecture from the perspective of someone who is thinking about space as a vessel for the way you experience the world and less about kind of the nuts and bolts. And yeah, I think, I would say that I also just don't have a memory in the same way that other people obsessed with architecture do. And so things kind of come and go, but maybe a feeling lasts. But, I'm certainly was not good at, remembering buildings or architects' names and things like that.
It's kind of refreshing to hear that, No, but because I feel like you're right. Like you're kind of expected to be interested in certain things because of what you're doing, right? And I kind of like that you're being honest with yourself. That's just not who you are, and you're not going to do that. And I think that's very smart, and that's probably also healthier for yourself, because then you're not pretending to have to be someone you're not, which I feel like probably a lot of us are doing.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, go ahead.
Oh, no,
ahead,
I was just going to say, yeah, it's freeing. And maybe it's something that is even easier to talk about now that, we're at a certain spot in our career where there's, maybe some achievements behind us and some latitude. It's sort of like, I know I would rather be the shortstop for the Toronto Blue Jays than doing this, but it just so happens we're pretty good at doing this as well. And I think, I joke as well. Like, obviously, I love the sort of process. I would say that nothing makes me happier than being in the studio and the process and the banter and the sweat and the kind of conviction. More so even than the end result or any of that sort of stuff. I definitely enjoy feeling a bit like an outsider, even in the kind of sphere of the profession. Maybe because I'm just not trying that hard or trying less hard to feel any kind of sense of belonging or a sort of comparison to other people. I love architecture, and there's nothing I love actually more than being somewhere and really being seduced by the work of others.
Where's your office located?
We have 3 offices now. We have one where I am right now, which is in Halifax, which is in Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada, sort of just up the coast from Boston. We have an office in Toronto, which is where I grew up, which is in Ontario, in the middle of the country, sort of in the middle of the country, in the big city. And then now we have an office in Berlin that we just opened in the last couple of months. And we just had an exhibition there that opened a week ago. And so we took our entire studio from both offices here in Canada for the exhibition, and it was sort of the first of hopefully many of these kind of team trips where we can really kind of go and just be moved by architecture outside of our region.
Just for some context, how many employees do you have across all 3 places?
The Berlin one is just starting, so we're just hiring now. The 2 other ones, in total, we have about 15 people. So it's not very big, but it's it's kind of a bunch of things. It's small enough that we can be very selective about the work that we take on. It's small enough that we can all be very involved in everything, and it's certainly not like many of the places I worked as a younger graduate or young architect, where it's very top down. It's it's about kind of having a group of really smart, talented people, and everyone's voice is sort of active in the discussion, both on the side of being critical and production. And so we just kind of collectively want to do cool things for really cool people. You know, that's
It,
sort of the MO.
yeah, that's a great MO. I mean, going back to the idea of not being concerned about belonging to this or that and fitting within a classification of sorts, I do think that's interesting. And part of the reason why I asked like where your offices are located, I was wondering, and this is me playing fake philosopher here,
Yeah.
is if like the location of where you are has anything to do with that. Because I find, so where I'm coming from is that, you know, in places where I've been, like New York City or LA
Yeah.
or San Francisco, there's this tendency for like 99.9% of the architects there to constantly be thinking about themselves relative to everyone else, all the other architects in that city.
Yeah.
And it's in part because, I don't know, maybe because of the culture of those places, the density of the designers, the number of designers and architects or whatever it is. But it's a very like, you're constantly thinking about those other people and what groups they're part of and not part of and this and that. And it becomes like a really big part of a lot of people's and offices thinking,
Yeah.
I feel like.
Totally agree. I think it's harder in those kind of more dense, larger centers. Despite being from Toronto and it being a massive city, one of, I think, the best things I ever did was move away from it just because it gave me some perspective that was kind of disassociated from those kind of pressures. You know, what I love about my life now is that we get to work on really exciting things all over the world and across the country and that sort of thing. And life is quite hectic, you know, it's quite intense. But coming home to this small coastal city that I live in is just like the perfect space to think and to be creative and to live in the studio and just kind of have those things at arm's length. And I sort of credit that to, you know, some of, you know, the success that the practice had. Also surrounding yourself by people who are also not all that interested in that sort of thing. So, you know, I look at many of my peers in the larger cities and you can see how influenced they are by everything that's going on there. And I think that's very difficult. So yeah, no, I think it's good. That being said, you know, I think sometimes you do things or evolve as a person, and then other things follow that. And so I think by me needing some space to concentrate and maybe feeling overwhelmed in larger centers, it ended up sort of producing, you know, this version of me that was able to kind of think freely and feel less bound to those pressures. And I think the work as a result really developed in a way that had its own language that's, you know, very much connected to me and our studio and the things that make us different without those influences.
I actually really like that. I don't know if you would call it an approach because it just kind of naturally occurs, but I like that. I think it's interesting. I've always thought about I always had this idea that as a creative individual, there's a sort of balancing act between what you consume, you know, your education, your knowledge, your traveling, what you see, your peers, all what you consume versus what you put out, and how those two things are related. And I also find that maybe there's some parallel between what you're saying and what happens now in the quote digital age. Now we've been in it for like the last 20 years, but the digital age where like design wise, young architects or all of us are hit potentially with so much information, and it's really hard to like to almost force yourself to be detached so you don't end up doing things that are, I would say, dishonest in your own work. It's more challenging now, I feel like.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That being said, I think that there's so much that I think it's like, imagine, you know, studying architecture in the 50s or something, right? And everybody's reading the same
The same two books.
Two books that, you can't
Yeah.
even get at the library, but there's no internet. And, so like you can imagine how influenced people are on those two books, on Mies and Frank Lloyd Wright or whatever it is. But now it's just like there's so much noise that it almost is like white noise in a way where there's almost everything and nothing to focus on. Yeah, I can't even really begin to explain the things that I'm drawn to, but I'm certainly less interested in chasing, like chasing other people's language and style and whatever hottest sustainability trend there is, like I feel like we're in a great spot where we can just kind of do our thing. And as a result, if you kind of maintain a level of honesty in the work, it's going to be unique.
I fully agree with that completely as well.
Did you always know that you would have your own practice?
No, not at all. I moved out here. I went to school here, moved back home. There was a lot of moving back and forth, right? In those years after school where you don't know what's going on, you're like, treading water. But I moved back out here for a job working for a notable architect and ended up just being laid off about a year or so, year and a half after starting. And so I don't even think I got to the point. That was about 5 years after school, but I hadn't got to the point of considering, if I was starting a practice or, when I would do that. I think it was deep in my head, like, down the road, that would be a nice thing to do, but it felt like a major privilege to be able to do that. So anyways, I was without a job and just started taking on really garbage jobs, like
like what?
Well, a little bathroom reno and like a deck. Actually, it was more garbage than that, to be honest. It was like I worked for an engineer who basically set up a CAD company, and it was like 1, 2, 3, like, permit drawing type company, right? It was the kind of company that put itself at the top of the yellow pages so that people would call, and they would call them to do like, building permits and stuff like that. So I was basically his internal drawing guy, and did a bunch of these little projects. And then it just had one kind of stroke of luck where someone wanted me to do a little addition on the back of their house. And so all of a sudden it was like, okay, bigger than the deck. But I kind of, and I don't know why exactly, because, it still took a while before I kind of, maybe even admitted that I was starting a practice of my own, because this all felt very temporary. I just sort of approached it like it was the most important project that I was ever going to do. So even if it was just a little addition or eventually a little cottage for someone, like the process, the sort of like the kind of like intensity of CA and the kind of discussions and the kind of involvement of it all, I kind of like jumped ahead as if I had already been in it for 10 years. And didn't think of it as a B project. I just thought, okay, this is what the world is going to start seeing all of a sudden.
This client's got the best service they could have got for the value, right?
I think so, yeah. Like, I mean, at the same time, I have no idea why they trusted me to do anything at that point.
Wait, so how old were you? Do you recall?
I guess I would have been around 30.
Okay.
Yeah, about 30.
Well, that's not like super young. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Got some years under the belt.
Yeah. So yeah, worked for 5 years, graduated, I guess, when I was around 25, and worked for different scales of firms. And And maybe this is like kind of connecting itself back to the theme of what we discussed earlier. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew exactly what I wasn't going to do, if that makes any sense. And by that
Yeah.
I mean I started imagining what a practice would look like. And at that moment it was just me in like my attic at home. Um, and so there was no practice, but it was like I started imagining what that practice would look like and what the culture would feel like and the kind of things that would be important to us, all the way to like, how people should be treating each other, and the kind of respect. So like, I think there's a part of me that always really looked down at the profession. The way that it's always been, the kind of the culture of it, and then even internally, as much as I do love architecture, I find myself spending most of my time almost entirely like away from architects. So, and it's not to say I don't, find common ground with people. It's just that's usually just not what I want to talk about, or I'm much more interested in people in other fields.
Well, we feel very flattered that you're on our show today.
No.
No, I get it. I mean, for a while when we started working, all of our friends were architects.
Oh, yeah.
And at some point, it's just like architecture, like too much. You kind of need to like disconnect and David's looking at me
she says
what
this,
are you saying?
but she she's partnered with an architect. She has an architecture office. And you have an archecture podcast. I think you're about as architect
I can
as you
back
can
away now. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I'm
you're
kind
in
of
it.
like into it, like full body. So that's it.
Well, we could go to Nova Scotia.
Yeah, exactly. But
Reset.
But this podcast, you guys have done such an amazing job of kind of, I think, talking to people, right? And it's less of the kind of academic sort of rigmarole that other things go through, where this is, I think, about experiences and how people evolved and what makes them different. And yeah, those are the things that I do find interesting in people. It's really just we've all been through this, but working in places as a junior and finding that most of your social situations with other architects are quite negative.
That's exactly why we started this podcast, in fact.
That's I had that distinct thought just the other day. We were excuse me, at some, where was I was at an event or two or something, and I met some architects, and every time I go to an event, if I meet like 5 architects, at least one is going to be like a bummer to listen to. And I'm like, man, could you like just not be so negative about everything, like nitpicking over the space we're in, complaining about clients? It's like, like I get it, it's tough, like for sure, of course it's tough, and of course sometimes clients are challenging, and there's many things that are difficult, but like you just don't need to be such a downer for lack of a better word.
Yeah, like just listening to people complain about procurement and whatever. It's just like, what, like I have a very kind of limited amount of energy that I want to dedicate entirely to the things that interest me. And I'm going to just let other people deal with, the things out of my control, right? I just want to have, an enriching sort of fun time that, fortunately, we are doing some really interesting things in, and that's very fortunate to be able to be, a little, pretty good at things that you're really excited about. Of course, like I said, I'd rather be a shortstop for the Blue Jays, but here we are. Like it's pretty good to have your second choice, right? Like I mean,
All right. So, are you a good baseball player?
I did play pretty serious up till like my late 20s. Not on the trajectory of anything serious, but like I played like A ball in Canada, which would be different than in the States. But yeah, like I've always been really excited about it, and it's nice to have those little hobbies or kind of interests outside. Because, we also know people who live and breathe this stuff all the time, right?
And shortstop was your position of that was your position?
Yeah, yeah, I would say in the early years, but yeah, it's just there's something really, and then there's like this crossover where like you also, nothing makes me happier, despite being a Blue Jays fan, like, enjoying old time stadiums and like Fenway Park and things like that where you kind of get a little bit of all of it. But I don't know. It's also just really nice to be able to kind of tune out and find the thing that brings you some rest and relaxation.
Yeah. Do you still play today?
No, I don't play. My son plays hockey, so I'm watching a lot of that and kind of just living through. He's 13, but I always love team sports and really, you look back and you kind of like really miss it. Of course, what we do now is sort of a team sport, I guess. But I just want him to like love every second of it because it doesn't last. It doesn't last forever. So I'm really enjoying just seeing how much fun he's having.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Baseball is actually a sport that continues to fascinate me because it's just really difficult. And I think this is a complete tangent now, but yeah. I don't think people fully realize how impossible it is to hit a ball as a batter in the major leagues. It's like, it doesn't make it almost shouldn't even be possible, to be honest.
It shouldn't be. And, many people who've played multiple sports, like Deion Sanders says, that's by far the hardest thing in sports to do is to hit that ball at that speed. I mean, you're hitting something that like most human beings can't even see. I don't know how we went down this tangent on an architecture podcast.
That's my fault.
But I love it. I love it. That made my day.
I was going to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, going back to architecture, sorry guys, but I was wondering if you...
I'd rather just keep talking about baseball.
I know. Well, yeah. I was wondering if when you started studying architecture, and I don't know what architecture is in Canada and how it is in school and all of that, but like I grew up in France, and like older architecture was always kind of like what was the meaning of architecture, right? Yeah. Capital A architecture is kind of like the old stuff.
Yeah.
And when I went,
stuff.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
And when I went to architecture school, I didn't even know that you could choose to do either old stuff or more contemporary architecture, right? Mm-hmm. It kind of like, I feel like it's kind of naturally introduced to you that you should be designing modern things.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But, when people graduate, sometimes they go back to, more vernacular type of buildings.
Yeah.
Did you know, or I guess at what point in your career or in school did you feel like you had an interest toward because your work is really modern. It's not just, transitional, like little hints of modern. It's really bold and modern. When did you find that was the language that you were going to be working with?
Yeah, it's, I just found that to be really exciting, right? I mean, to think about, new ways of thinking about old ideas, as opposed to things that are like completely alien. But, I think that's it. It's just new expressions for old ideas, a different interpretation of the vernacular, all of those sort of things. And then, of course, you want to push it as far as you can. But then there was also the thing in school, and maybe you question that a little bit in professional life, but that if you weren't doing modern or contemporary architecture, it was sort of like you were doing work that was kind of irrelevant, which seems a little harsh, because, as we know, like the odd thing is we all secretly love that stuff. Right?
Yeah.
That's true. What the heck is that about?
Yeah, exactly. But, I think the thing is we all love the authentic stuff of that, not the kind of suburban McMansion kind of version of it. I think so, it's a tough one and we all battle it. And so I think, that's why people like Thomas Heatherwick, I think, are speaking about really interesting things. And, I know that he receives quite a bit of backlash about it. But, I think just being honest with the fact that we're all drawn naturally to these things that are highly textured and, could be organic, but speak to kind of the things that humans are drawn to, as opposed to kind of the cold, sterile boxes. And so I think finding a way to find that middle ground is maybe where we exist. But I don't know, you're always thinking about that stuff. It's a weird thing. I don't know if there's any other profession where the thing that we all do in the sort of critical realm is so unpopular in the public.
I mean, a lot of professions are misunderstood for sure, but I don't know if I'm trying to think of ones that are, as parallel as you described. It's a really good point. And that's honestly one of the things that really, so like when I went to school, you just did what will be classified as modern architecture to the general public. No one did traditional work.
No.
Like it just didn't exist in my school.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a question. It never came up.
Yeah.
And like you learned about it and like, oh, Gothic. Okay. Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
But we're not going to use that for any purpose really.
Yeah.
And then practicing at other architecture offices when I graduated, and maybe you had the same experience. They all did also quote modern stuff. Traditional, transitional, whatever was never even a word that was ever spoken about within the office. And the first time I was really hit with the understanding, like you said, of what the rest of the world sees and what they think and how they view things was when we started our own practice. And suddenly everyone's talking about, what is it? French chateau, modern French chateau, and whatever else. And I'm like, I just didn't. And the first few months, my mouth was open all the time. I didn't know what to say to people.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about? This is not architecture.
People say French chateau. I mean, you mean like a chateau in France, right? No. It's like this fake, made-up thing that just fits, checks the boxes. And I'm like, I think you're right. Like, I've always feel kind of like torn between the two sides, right? Like, my roots are like, France from the countryside, like all the stuff is appreciated, valued and beautiful. And the modern stuff, like sometimes it's cool and sometimes it's like really bad, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It comes down to the authenticity and what is the building trying to say as a story, right? Like if the building has an empty soul, it's just going to be whatever it is. If it's an expression of traditional or modern, it's going to fail.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think, it's a case by case type thing, but it's a tricky one. Yeah, like we all sort of leave school with these sort of grand ideas and realize that, not a single soul around us, minus the people we went to school with or people in our field, really kind of understand what we're doing and why we do it, right? Using, I don't know about your parents, but my parents as a good test for that. It's like, they're proud of the stuff that we do, but, they couldn't think it's weirder, like it's like like, I don't know what this is exactly, but they're just like, we're proud that you're doing it, whatever it is.
Whatever
they don't really get it.
Yeah, these spaceship / sandcrawler type buildings that you're so fascinated about. But which also like it's such a funny thing when we're all trying to run businesses and we're all kind of fighting for the 1%, and I don't even mean the kind of like financial 1%. I just mean 1% of the population who is really drawn to contemporary architecture.
Yeah. And now, a quick break to thank the sponsors who support the Second Studio.
This episode of the Second Studio is brought to you by BQE Core, the all-in-one firm management software built for architects. Designed by architects for architects, Core helps you track time effortlessly, manage projects seamlessly, and get paid faster, so you can focus on design and not spreadsheets. With powerful automation and real-time insights, it's everything you need to run a smarter, more profitable firm. See how BQE Core can transform your practice by clicking the link in our show notes. The Second Studio podcast is sponsored by Autodesk. Do you know about Autodesk Forma? Available standalone or as part of their AEC Collection software bundle, it's a specialized AI-assisted 3D design tool that can transform early project planning. With Forma, you can rapidly model multiple massing options at the start of your projects and analyze the embodied carbon costs of different volumes, layouts, and material choices. You can then deepen your understanding of your sites by incorporating real-world contextual data for daylight, wind, noise, and more. Start your projects right with Autodesk Forma. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more.
I was gonna ask you that too, because again, like, you know, the nature of your projects, and you know, like we're in LA, there's a lot of people who like modern architecture, let's say, but there is really like just a few of them that would be interested to go to that level of modern in the expression.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, you know, by now, because of your career and your track record, like clients who come to you, that's what they want.
Yeah.
But do you feel like I guess, how do you vet clients to make sure that they're the right type of client for what you're trying to do with your architecture?
But I would say though that it is like, you know, once we have an understanding that they didn't just like find our name in the phone book or Google us, you know, that they were drawn to the kind of work that we do. You know, like one of the first tests is, you know, what project were you drawn to, right? Like, so you get some sense of what flavor they're after in the kind of larger spectrum of work that we've done. But yeah, I think once you become so specialized in the kind of work or experimentation that you do, the only way to find work is to make yourself as visible as possible so that people can come to you, because there's no way to figure out who they are exactly. You know, it's really tough.
So what would be like the ideal client for you? Is it someone who says, here's a loose program, I'm super open, do whatever you want? Is it someone who's really hands-on? Is it someone who, I don't know, is hyper involved in the process every step of the way?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be the second part of the last question. You know, I think we always try to find people who have a comfort of not knowing where we're going, right? So the comfort of the unknown. And all they have is, you know, they can look at the work we've done and they really appreciate that they all ended up in very different places. And then so there's a level of trust that you've sort of earned by, you know, having this portfolio of work. But ultimately, the best client is the one who's like, okay, let's ask these questions, let's be involved, but let's also have comfort in not knowing where this is going to end up. It's just going to end up somewhere really exciting.
That is, I think, really well said. Also, I find like that kind of person is maybe, you know, 5% of the 1%.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I hear you.
There's 10 people on the planet.
It definitely takes a certain I mean, and kudos to those clients. It takes a lot of, you know, courage. There's a lot of risk involved because these projects are expensive. Architects, you know, in a way are expensive. It's a lot of money being put into it. And for someone to embrace the idea of like, well, let's see what happens. That is a kind of a cavalier in a certain way. And obviously have a certain amount of finances to do so.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. But, you know, after 15 years of doing this, I also have to say that, you know, the kind of bigger budget projects don't necessarily make the project more interesting. And there's something about the kind of constraint of limited means, whether it's like on the kind of property side or the scale of the building or the kind of parameters you're dealing with, it just makes for slightly more interesting results, I find, even if it's a bit more difficult.
What kinds of projects are you guys doing these days? Is it mostly houses, a mixture of houses and other types? I know you do different types of work, but is there a balance you like to try and keep if you can control that? Yeah,
like I think the dream was always to do a majority of public work. That's always been where, but you know, I'm going to go on my procurement rant, but you know, it's impossible. It's impossible to do that, right? I mean, generally, when you're working on public projects and you're going through the RFP type process, it's how many of something you've done, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it very difficult. And so we've found really good luck through competitions and through collaboration that allowed us to kind of enter into these discussions. And then we really just tried to do the best job possible. So like we're doing a library right now. We have a bunch of resorts we're working on. We have a art gallery that we won a competition for in collaboration with some other amazing firms, as well as a performance space. So like we're doing buildings of all different kinds of scales now, with sort of half of it still being houses and products we're working on, and kind of like a huge spectrum of things, all of which are just so exciting. Like, to build a practice where you can just do things to scratch the itch that you've had for years. Like, for example, wanting to design light fixtures or hardware or, a theater or a library. I mean, all those things are just so exciting, but took a lot of sort of persistence and patience to get to that point.
That's a lot of different things for 15 people. Do you think that you're going to grow? I mean, how does that, it sounds like, it's the volume of work is one thing.
Yeah.
And actually people might be surprised, like a relatively small office, small meaning 0 to 15 can pump out a lot of work, but the variety also is another, let's say, challenge and factor for sure.
Yeah, well, I think, one thing that I always thought was ridiculous and really just sort of to need to get there to prove that myself was just this idea that you can't enter into an arena of a specific kind of work and not do something exceptional. I really think, they're always asking, how many of a project you've done, but no one ever asks how many of those were good.
I know.
Yeah, I know. It's brutal.
I know. It doesn't mean the quantity doesn't mean quality.
No, it doesn't. Whether it was our first restaurant or first art gallery or whatever, the approach is the same, and design is design, and our own personal experiences weigh into this, equation. And I really think that you can do anything. It's a made up thing that you have to be specialized in that way. I think design comes down to an interest in these things, and these scales don't matter, other than you're able to, as a collective, change kind of the construct that you're working within. Yeah.
I think I agree completely. Of course, what most people think or most clients think is oftentimes I found to be, if anything, the opposite, because they are ultra concerned with how many you've done, or in some cases I've seen even for houses, it's like, okay, you do houses. Yes, I do houses. Where do you live? I live in this place. Oh, well, you are an hour outside of my particular neighborhood. I need an architect in my neighborhood because they know my neighborhood. I'm like, what the?
Yeah, exactly.
What? It's not like you live in Nova Scotia and I'm in California. We're talking about we're a 45-minute drive away from each other in a specific region in California. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
They're trying to limit risk. I think they're like the opposite of that 5% of the 1%, right?
That's
they
true.
want like zero risk at all. So
that's
they
true.
want certainty. That's what they're looking for.
Then they're not the right fit for me.
No, they're not. But it's interesting with, the whole like RFP and like how many have you done? Because I think, and again, it's just me, if I was the client looking for an architect, I would probably go with the firm that's never done one but really wants to do one, because I feel like they would probably try harder, come up with newer ideas, like really do something different.
Absolutely.
If I want the same library as every single town around mine, then yeah, sure, go with the guys that have been doing it for 10 years. But you're just going to get you're going to get the same dish. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But, it's also why our environment looks the way it does, right? I mean, there are so few sort of highlights and outliers that kind of represent kind of, these better ideas and maybe some risk that was overcome, the real kind of highlights. But, most of the things around us are done by by people who churn it out. Of course, that means limited risk, unless the risk is that, it's underwhelming or unextraordinary. Like I guess but I think that's the risk, unfortunately, that depending on the kind of client group they're willing to take. Maybe it's weird that that's so low on the kind of bar of expectations that design excellence is like at way down there.
It's making me wonder if you've thought about that relative to other countries and places, if in your experience or view or whatever, that other countries tend to place design excellence and quality higher on the list of criteria compared to Canada, or I have my opinions about the United States, but
Yeah, I think that we all think that place exists, but everywhere has their own problems. Different problems. I know in Europe with the sort of heavy sort of competitions-based system, I think it produces far better results, but it also there are issues like free work and unpaid competitions and that kind of culture, which is also unfair. So I don't know.
Nuts. I thought you were going to name a place and that would be, that would be. So what are competitions like for you? Are they as grueling and as difficult as the European ones, where there sometimes is not enough money at all to cover the cost?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're going into well, maybe this is also the thing, right? I mean, yeah, we lose a ton of money. I don't even think we pay attention, really. Like, we don't do a lot of them, but the ones we go in on, we are going 1,000% on. So, if we're going to dedicate these resources to try and go for one of these things, and we've done a handful with, pretty good results, it was because we went like way over the top, and I'm sure we never recovered the funds, at the end of that. But, I think, you just got to go for it. You have to go for it as hard as you can, because, you just have to sort of always imagine you're up against, super talented firms that also have unlimited resources, and it's not a even playing field. So, you make up with all of it, everything in our profession with just work, right? So, I think that's it, is we go all in.
What was the idea behind opening the studio in Berlin? Are you guys trying, or maybe you have a bunch of projects in Europe? Like, what's the motivation?
Yeah, we have a bunch of projects in Europe, pretty small scale, kind of small and medium. We have one in Paris, we have a small one in the English countryside, and we have a more developer project in Hamburg and each of these with local collaborators. And that's something that brings us a lot of joy, is actually working with other people. It kind of, I think, is enriching to the work. It also, we can't be everywhere all the time. I think it's also provides a level of security and experience on the ground that's, I think only good for the project and for the client. So, I think some of our best experiences have come through collaboration. But you know what? The idea for Berlin was, we wanted an international studio. We were more drawn to Europe than to the United States, which is where more Canadian firms go. And this was just sort of an idea I had, half a decade ago, and just decided, okay, let's do this now. And Berlin, you want to hear like really silly reasons. I just really like I just like going there, and I have a good group of peers in other professions, other fields in the arts. It's a place that, like Halifax, I feel like I can just think, like there's something about the pace or the tenor or the environment that just makes for good space for creativity with limited sort of influences in comparison, let's say, to London and Paris, which are, that much more intense, I think, in other ways. And so it was just, it was that. And so, kind of put roots down and starting to build a little bit of a team over there. But, ultimately, we're just trying to do work all over the place. Anything that sort of fits what we want to do anyways.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I thought you would say you went to Berlin because of the beer, but I guess this is
maybe also that, but
the reasoning for going to Berlin is like, a perfect example of the earlier part of the conversation and how you kind of approach or think about things or move through life, I think.
Yeah.
Is it challenging though to have an office of 15 that's split now in 3 different places? Because I feel like normally
time zones and things.
You talk about the time zones and whatever else. I feel like a lot of times when architecture offices have or in different locations, they're usually on the bigger side in total numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I would say, imagining we're closer to 20 between the 3 studios, in the next couple months. I would say that's where I want to be, and that's where we want to be. Like, there's something really important about being involved in everything. There's only so much time. I'm just not interested with my partners to be kind of just handing things off. There's something nice about doing things slowly and carefully, and things that are considered. So in that way, it's sort of the perfect number. In terms of the time zones and things, between Halifax and Toronto, which is a 1-hour difference, it's been pretty good over the years. I mean, we also have someone on the West Coast in British Columbia, which is a little trickier, but I think we just try and sort of have a lot of flexibility in terms of, work schedules, and people are pretty understanding in terms of when we need to meet and discuss things. But, anyone who's, really saying that things can't be done virtually, I mean, we kind of proved that you could during COVID. And, we had back to office right away because studio culture is really important to us. But you can still, move things along and be really sort of engaging, even in a virtual world.
I was going to ask if you'd ever consider or think about going completely virtual, so everybody is working from home and wherever they are.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And even when COVID sort of wrapped up and people were slowly heading back to the office, or not, because and I don't know what it was like in LA, but in Toronto at least, many offices had a very tough time. I think people were valuing working from home even more than their salary. And so we just didn't do that even for a day. It was back to work. I think the people who want to be in our studio also appreciate, being at a table with one another and sketching together and having those conversations, even if some people are, on their screen and calling in from the other cities. It's just, I think, a group of people who really find being together helpful. And I could be lying to myself about that. Maybe they hated it. I'm not sure. But
well, it sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. I think it's like, it brings me a lot of joy, I think. So I was like, it makes us all happy, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I think look, when we were in, the heat of COVID, there was an optimism about the architecture offices, everyone working remotely, and a lot of offices embraced it. Yeah. And they were like, it's a full, what is it? A flex policy, whatever policy. And then, but, off like the record, when you speak to the partners, you're like, this is a bad idea. I know it's a bad idea. I'm like, okay, then why is everyone and then, of course, 2 months later, oh, no, we're not doing that. We're back to office. It's just there's an immediacy to it, right? And you can read the people. It's more fun.
It is fun.
It's all of us came in the studio culture of architecture school, and like you don't have that buzz unless you're in person.
Exactly. It's fun. I think there are many other things you could do and make more money and have an easier life if you didn't really enjoy studio culture and the way that we work. So, and I would understand it if some people didn't want to do that and actually just would rather be at home. But those people didn't find their way to our office. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of other places to be.
I have a very specific question, and it's more about the practicing of architecture. Do you find that and I'm zooming in here, construction administration
Yeah.
is less commonly performed by architects these days, or in your area? Like more and more. Where I'm coming from is I frequently talk to potential clients, I should say.
Yep.
And they're like, well, what is that? I've spoken to 5 architects and no one's talked about that. I'm like, how is that? What do you mean you haven't heard about this phrase if you've spoken to 5 architects?
Yeah. You know what? I don't know who's asked, like I feel like I've had that discussion with people, but it's so important for us. I'm sure it's very important for you guys. I mean, there's one thing about drawing things or modeling it, but to actually we all know what happens when we're not on site, right? Like,
yeah, it's like the kids throwing a party when the parents aren't around.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. Well, what are you doing?
Well, like other people have ideas all of a sudden, right? And so it's like, well, what was the point of trying to do something special and cohesive and interesting if it's all just happening, happenstance on site? So it's tough to, in some cases, convince the client of that, probably because a lot of architects just shrug that part of the process off, like they maybe offer that as a service, just say, we do it up to this point and then these are your drawings and then, good luck with it. But it's really the difference between a project you're proud of and a project that you're not is kind of your activity on site and the relationships you build and the kind of problem solving that happens with the builder and consultants. It's a tricky one, but it's very weird also that many architects have sort of passed that part of the process off.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've certainly seen it, and I don't understand. I don't think it's possible to really see through a project that is as specific as the ones you do, for example, without being involved in construction. Another thing I was wondering is, earlier on we were talking kind of like, I guess, your design philosophy in a certain sense, to describe it in one way. But do you guys have a specific process or approach when you're starting a project? Do you have, I doubt it's a step-by-step kind of color by the numbers thing, but is there something in place that provides a consistent structure from one thing to the next? Is it a working method?
Yeah, I guess there is a methodology, and it isn't a strict kind of checklist, but it certainly starts, especially when we're working in new places, by spending a lot of time there and really kind of understanding what makes it different than the place next door to it, like what sort of material language, what about construction methodology, what about a formal sort of, rationale behind the kinds of things that developed over time, because ultimately we want our work to feel like an extension of the things that have meaning and that have already existed and tell a story about a place, but also have I think a language of its own. We always say that our projects are like the weird kid in the family. It's like you're related, you're still completely connected, but maybe you have this other sort of personality aspect that just sort of really kind of is loud in some other ways. And so it's not afraid to be a little bit weird or interesting or bold. Or even muted in some cases, but still connected. So I would say that's the process. And that, I think, goes between the kind of scales of projects we do, whether it's a house in Nova Scotia or a library in Edmonton or a gallery in Toronto. It starts with place and really kind of understanding context.
You mentioned other offices, maybe the ones you worked at or in general, being fairly top down, and you guys are less that way or not that way. How does the how does the top down or not top down, apply to your office, and how does it function in that way?
Yeah, I have two business partners, Stephanie Hossain, who leads our Toronto office, and Jordan Rice, that leads Halifax with me. And then a few associates. And, I would say that we try often, depending on the projects, we'll often start with a charrette. Like sometimes we'll be just jamming as a full team. We'll take the day off or a couple days off as the full team and just be kind of jamming on some ideas together and start to kind of filter that down. In other cases, it'll start with Jordan or it'll start with me. And I think the fact of the matter is, I don't really care if it's a story about me or not, like it's just not
Yeah.
that important. And that is seemingly the most important thing to much of the profession. And, certainly as it goes back generations, this sort of silly idea of, ownership, it's a joke. And it also never existed before. I've always sort of thought that, these ideas, this sort of divine sketch and all that, there are a lot of people involved in a project, and ideas go from the student to the kind of intermediate architect to the, structural engineer and back, and things are constantly moving. And sure, maybe in a lot of those cases, it starts with some sketch I made or someone else made, but that's definitely the least important part of the whole thing. And we've, actively sort of fought against that kind of idea just because it doesn't matter. It's all about the work.
Yeah. I think also there's an attitude, ego, ethos aspect to what you're talking about. When we mentioned going back in time and thinking about the architects that we all studied about, they're also presented in that way too, of like, this is the master architect, they draw it, and they're the ones that are divine, like you said. And it does produce a weird culture actually within the profession.
Yeah, they also mostly seemed like not really great people.
This is true.
Certainly not
Yeah.
anybody I'd want to hang out with. So I think
Yeah.
I think maybe that's it. Is like in your life, who are the people that you admire? Who are the people that you see how they kind of go around and make people feel good about their own ideas and themselves, and how do you uplift people? You see leaders of different kinds. On the one spectrum, it's people who are just yelling at people all the time, and on the other, there are people who are just like lifting people up. And so, not that I can name specific things, but it's like it's so much. Maybe this goes back to the sports thing. I've always been a lot more interested in being a part of a team. At the beginning of this, maybe it was all me, at the beginning of this journey. And I can say unequivocally, this is as happy and as fulfilled as I've ever been in my life and in my career, because I'm surrounded by amazing people. The sort of, those sort of accomplishments on your own is a very sort of empty sort of thing. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
We don't even have we used to frame things and whatever. All of the kind of like awards and all that jazz that we have are just in a storage locker in our studio. We don't even have a single thing on the wall, just because I think it's so ridiculous. And maybe part of that comes from going to other people's offices and seeing that as the first thing that when you walk in, and it just feels sort of pathetic.
I was also going to ask you about having your work published, applying to publications, and all that stuff. Because it's for folks who don't know, for the most part, unless you get super lucky, it is a very long, arduous, and extremely, at least here, expensive pursuit. And it kind of would seem on paper the antithesis of your jam.
Yeah, you know what? And we definitely did a lot more of that earlier on. But I would say the intent behind it isn't the same as what I imagine most people do, which is to, be able to wear that chain around your neck.
Right.
It was all about opportunities. And so we were able to get a lot of press right from the start, and it was entirely about opportunities. So even with the awards, these things bring opportunities. Publications, they bring potential projects, and you're going to be visible to potential clients, all these sort of things. And yeah, sure, you can look back and feel, proud that as a group we were able to accomplish certain things. But it was a means to this larger thing, which is to end up where we are now in our practice, and to kind of keep going with that. And I don't
Is
want
there
to I don't
a
want to sound like I knew all of this at the beginning. I think it's you learn, right? And you learn what makes you happy, what feels empty, what wasn't what you thought it was gonna be like. And then also having a real understanding of, I think, both yourself and human nature, which is that you can't rely on these kind of external validations for your own happiness, because you'll never get there. And you can see that even with, the people at the so-called top, still at least seeming like they aren't happy. So like, I don't know what that is, but I don't want to be like that. What, fill in the blank on that. So, I just want to feel fulfilled. I want to enjoy every day in the studio with the amazing people I'm around. We do a lot of laughing in the office, along with working hard. But, the day to day, that's like being able to live this life. And I don't mean to sound like spiritual or anything, because that's not what I mean. I just mean this scenario that I'm in, where we get to design cool things for cool people, and this is the job, is like, that is the gift. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a good gig. And I agree with what you said about if you focus so much on these accolades and these things you're going to collect, it's kind of an empty feeling afterwards, because you get it and you're like, okay, well, that's it. It doesn't actually change the day-to-day outside of the opportunities, like you mentioned. I think it's well said.
Yeah.
Is there a type of project that you haven't done yet that you want to?
Type of project. I'd love to do a rec center. And that sounds like a funny one, but I'm just thinking of like myself as a kid in a middle class kind of neighborhood, middle class family. It's like, what are the kind of places that you go to, not as a person in the kind of super elite kind of part of society, but just like, people in the community. And you have the ability to kind of shape their experience or their day, like I remember spending time, where I grew up in Brampton at the public library, or like the rec center that was just down the road. And, you're there all the time. And these sort of things really have a major impact on people. And so I think that's it, is like, as much as it went from houses to public work to that sort of stuff, to be able to do meaningful things for regular people like the family I grew up in, that would be amazing and ultra fulfilling.
I like that one. I've always wanted to do a mall for similar reasons, but a bit more consumeristic.
Yes, exactly.
And also because a lot of malls are garbage. I'm like, I think I think I could do slightly better than these.
Especially in California, the whole indoor outdoor. I mean, you could do things like you could do really cool things. Our tradition is a last question that we like to ask is, what is your favorite building?
My favorite building. I do.
If you're stuck, you could have a top 3.
I do have an answer for this.
Okay.
The outside of Copenhagen, the church designed by Utzon. I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. I'm horrible with names. That's the other thing. with the sort of sculpted ceiling that allows light in. Huge influence on, our work, despite the fact that I can't remember the name of it.
Is it the bag?
Yes, exactly.
Bags of far?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And we've all studied that thing in school. And, there's just something so incredible about the way in which you can shape light. Fenway Park, like I said, different scale altogether.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
Just gonna throw baseball back in there. Well, that one in particular, just because the constraints in which you fit in a baseball stadium 100 and something years ago within a tightly sort of wound urban situation, which led to kind of its very odd proportions. I mean, just makes it so singular, which is, it's beautiful. It's unlike any other place. And then I would say of our own work, I'm a huge fan of, well, I guess you didn't really ask about our own work, did you? But
No, I'm curious. Go ahead.
yeah, I would just say, like, as maybe a part of this whole dialogue about, feeling really lucky. Like, my house is like the perfect medicine for my hectic life. It's like this, wood-lined cocoon that just gives me a lot of like calm, sort of connected but disconnected to the environment, and a place that I can spend time with my family and cook and, do that sort of thing. And then just feel like supercharged. Also, just the idea that I even have that, which is sort of beyond anything I would have ever dreamt of, earlier on. So it was like a real sort of gift to be able to do something like that for myself.
That's really cool.
That's
and
amazing.
it's also a really cool house,
Thank
for
you.
sure. Omar, this was amazing. Thank you so much for making the time on a Friday. The conversation was super interesting. It was funny. Oftentimes when we do these, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about like names, titles for the episode and descriptions. And this one, I truly don't know, in a very positive way. Something about, I don't know, I have to think about this one, but I enjoyed the conversation a lot. It was different. And I think your work is phenomenal. So thank you.
Thank you guys
Thank you.
very much. I appreciate it. It was a super sort of refreshing discussion that I hope brought you as many laughs as it brought me. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. If you like what we are doing, then please support the show by leaving a review of it in the Apple Podcast app, Spotify. You can also find us on YouTube. We have an Instagram, so check us out, follow us there. We have reels, guest work images, quotes, whatever else. And we have a website, which is secondstudiopod.com, an email, hello@secondstudiopod.com. And then lastly, a hotline. So many different ways to reach out to us. The hotline is 213-222-6950. Call and leave a voicemail or a text message if you have any ideas for recordings, like topics, guest suggestions. What else would they say? You want jokes? Marina wants jokes. And
And
I don't know. What else
Christmas
would there be?
gifts?
Questions, Christmas gifts? I don't know. Just reach out. Whatever. Get coffee. You want to get coffee? Reach out.
You're in LA, you want to get coffee? Hit me up.
Don't do that.
Why not?
Because then I have to say yes. If you're abroad, you want to get coffee, go ahead, message me. Then I'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I don't live where you live. Okay. Is that it? Outro? Good?
That's it. Thank you. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.